Hey guys, so today's vlog is going to be the second vlog in my reading favorite trope series. The basic premise of this series was for me to go and find books that contain my favorite tropes. So in the first video of the series I did time travel. Time travel is one of my all-time favorite tropes. I'm hoping that this can also kind of work as a recommendation series if you're looking for a particular kind of book of a particular kind of trope. Today we are doing Mafia families or crime families. This is a new trope I've discovered that I really loved. I didn't realize I loved. I read back in January Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves, and there is a Mafia family in that, and I was just obsessed with them. Having a family in a story is something I love to see in itself, especially in fantasy stories where the stakes are so high, but having a family that deals in crime, whole new level. So I thought it'd be really fun to try and find some more. I finished Jade City. I had every intention on giving you guys a update halfway through the book to let you know how I was going, but something happens like at exactly the halfway point. It was something that was so unexpected, out of left field completely. I had to read the rest of the book because I just did not know what was going to happen. I needed to find out. This book is fantastic. As an urban fantasy book, we are focusing on this city and we're focusing on the main family, and that's currently in rulership in this city. You are following them and their gang wars between other rival clans and such, and the gang wars are over Jade. Now in this world, Jade has magical properties, and if you wear Jade, it allows you to do all kinds of crazy things, like give you super strength, do like all sorts of like kind of magical things. However, there is a catch. If you have not had the required training or the necessary training, then you can fall into madness by using Jade. You also have to be from a certain lineage to be able to use Jade. So it was a fixed magic system. I think that's my preferred fantasy system because then you have a very clear idea of how things work. I just love it, and I really love how Fonda approached it. The magic system was just like A+++. The characters, also A+++. What I thought was so brilliant is we're following three main characters. We're following Shay, who is the only daughter, and she has been outcasted because she was in a relationship with a foreigner and she was living overseas for a very long time, and she's recently returned home. And then we have Hilo, who is her brother. How do I describe him? He's like the second in command. He's the guy that does all the dirty work behind the scenes. He's very hot-headed in movies when there's always like the big buff guy, and he's gets really angry quite quickly and can make some impulsive choices with very little thought behind them. That's him, but he was just so much more than that. Like, that sounds like such a stereotype of a character, but he didn't feel like a stereotype. I really loved the contrast between Shay's character, who was very hesitant and sort of outside of the family, and then you have Hilo, who's very much in the family and very loyal to the family, and it was just really interesting, the dynamic between those two, and that's where a lot of the conflict between those two characters in this book is, because they have differences there. And then you have Lan, who is their older brother, and he's the next pillar of the family, which is basically the head of the family. The whole dynamic between the three of them, the more I think about it, the more I love it, and think just how well done it was. This was just fantastic. Like, I just can't say that enough. What I also really loved about this was there's another kind of main character who I feel like is going to become a more prominent figure in the next two books. He is the cousin to these characters, and in some ways he's also kind of like an outsider, but also you get a sense that he's really going to become a very significant member of the family. Yeah, so he's a lot younger than the rest of the characters, and he's in school. And what was really cool through his character was we were getting a little peek into how the other characters were brought up and how they had to go to school to train and like learn how to harness the Jade, because you have to really train to be able to use Jade. And it was just so well done, so fascinating, so complex in so many ways. I just love this. I can't recommend this enough. I listened to the audiobook, by the way. The audiobook is really fantastic, but I wish I read a physical copy because I just had so much I wanted to annotate. I'm definitely going to get a physical copy and reread it, but I just cannot recommend this enough. I'm a decent way through Winter's Reach, so I thought I would give you guys an update. I am listening to the audiobook, and I do really like the narrator. I think it's quite easy to follow, and even the story itself is quite easy. There are multiple characters in this. We're following one character, Felix, who is a little bit of a generic fantasy character, I would say. He is the youngest son of this aristocratic house. I'm not exactly sure how their family is in terms of like nobility, but their father's title is a pope, and there is also religion been mixed into the story. So Felix's father wants him to marry off to another aristocrat daughter so that their family can prosper, but of course Felix doesn't want that, and he secretly has a lover who is a common barmaid. So Felix has come up with this plan to go to Winter's Reach, which used to be a island for prisoners, and now it's a colony, and he has information that says that there in Winter's Reach there is a mine, and his family, if they buy the mine, they can prosper from it. So that's his plan and his agenda. And then we are also following these bounty hunters. I'm not entirely sure what they're up to yet. The main character is Marie, and then the older guy is who she's working under. And then there's also some witch lady that we're also following, who I'm getting the sense that's the antagonist. Also do have a couple of POVs from Felix's siblings. So he has an older sister, Olivia, who is the oldest, and she would inherit their father's title if she was male, but of course, you know, fantasy worlds, they love to do it so that the females are never worthy of getting any titleship. And then there's Carlos, who is the next heir, so he will inherit the title of Pope. I feel like I've just gone into the introduction of who everyone is and the kind of the setup of this world. It seems like the focus is going to be this Winter's Reach, because that's the title of the book and that's where Felix is currently heading towards. We'll see how that goes down. I finished Winter's Reach. I think something that I'm always going to run a risk with when it comes to these videos is not finding books where the trope I like is a heavy theme, or there's a possibility that it could not be present in the book at all. Most of the time I was reading this, I was kind of trying to figure out how the Mafia family is part of the story. From the ending part of the book, the way the story was set up, it does appear that the Mafia family is going to become a more prominent feature in the series later on, so in the next few books. I think this is a 4-book series. This just didn't do it. I really thought Felix was going to be the focus of the story. He didn't really end up being that much of a focus. I also was expecting, when the whole story and setup was introduced, I thought it was going to be Felix and his siblings who were going to be part of this crime family, and then Felix has like his own storyline, and then his two siblings have a storyline together. The two siblings basically want to inherit the role that their father has. Like, Felix and his two siblings, I don't think ever really interacted at all. There might have been one scene, but that was like it. I'm used to reading a lot of fantasy books where there are multiple POVs, but there's usually a thread between them all, like whether that's a war going on and we're looking at how all these different characters are being impacted by the war, or they might have like a common goal. And this book definitely at times felt like almost like an anthology, right? The plots were so separate from one another and weren't affecting one another, which sounds kind of ridiculous, right? Because like Felix's siblings fighting over power that their family has inherited should affect him, but he was off doing his own thing, worried about his love life, which was entertaining. Oh, and the last thing I'll say about this, the way the magic was done in this was, it was all performed by females, first of all, and it was always to do with self-harm. That's how the magic was performed, or in some sort of sexual way, which I was not a fan of. Okay, I have started the Godfather. That was so good. I can't wait to edit it. Anyway, I'm about like 180 pages-ish into this. I wasn't expecting to love this as much as I have been, but this is amazing. I love this because it's so dramatic. Like, it's one of the most dramatic books I have ever read. We start off at this wedding, and it is the wedding of the daughter of the Godfather. And at this wedding, we're introduced to everyone in the family business and their roles. So there's someone who's an assassin, there's someone who is a family lawyer. We're introduced to the Godfather's 3 sons and how they play a role or don't play a role in the family business. And then we are also, of course, introduced to Don Coloni, who is the Godfather himself. We also see how he kind of does his business. He has all these people come to the wedding and interact with him and have requests for what they want him to do. It's just so dramatic. Like, I can't even like describe to you how dramatic it is, which I wasn't expecting. And it's dramatic to the point that it's kind of hilarious. I love the writing as well. I just really love how it's told. Like, especially the introduction, we were introduced to all these different characters, minor characters who are not really going to have any, I don't think, relevance to the overall story, but we're introduced to their problems. And then at the end of like their paragraph, it's like, I gotta go see the Godfather. And it was just like so dramatic. I knew this was an older book, but I didn't realize that this takes place the year after the Second World War. And I was trying to think about books I've read and if I read anything set after the Second World War that's not about the war, and I don't think I ever really have. So it's cool to read in this time period, but about other things that are going on in this time period. And I feel like I'm kind of biased to this because I'm Italian. Like, the Italian wedding that we started off in is so easy for me to picture because I've been to like so many. Like, I literally had one Italian wedding to go to like every year of my life growing up. It's just so easy for me to put myself in the story and in the family and in the dynamics. I mean, my family's not a Mafia family. I don't want you to think that, but I just love the whole family dynamic and the family business and like how it's in crime, and oh, it has me living truly. I completed The Godfather. I had to kind of let it sit with me for a couple of days and think about how I felt about the story and what I was going to rate it, because I wasn't really sure at first. I knew I loved it, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to give it, because there are some factors in this book that usually really bother me and will impact star ratings, and that is women. Now, in this, the women aren't sexualized. That's kind of like my number one thing, I feel like, is how a lot of male authors choose to sexualize women. It's something I really despise. And then a lot of the time women can be used to further the plot in some way or to further the development of male characters. There's so many ways it can be done. In this particular book, the women weren't really part of the story. The only women who were included in the story were the wives, the sisters, and even the mothers, but they didn't have a significant role, and there was a few of them who were physically abused. This is a book set in the 1940s, most of it, so women back then were property to their male partners. It's not great, like it's not nice, it's not great, but it is true to the times. I know a lot of people say that in fantasy books, like historically women aren't, you know, in leadership roles, so they didn't have rights, but then fantasy books have magic, so I just don't hold that argument accountable, because if you can include magic and dragons in your fantasy books, why can't you include women with rights? The thing I've been kind of thinking about the last few days is, should I drop a star rating? I wouldn't drop a full star rating because I don't think it was that extreme. Like there's different levels, obviously. It was still there and it was a very male dominated story, but I still loved this. So I'm giving this a 5 stars. I'm really kind of surprised. I was hoping I would enjoy this book, but I didn't think I would love it. I think this is going to be in my top books of 2020. One of my favorite things that the book did was it would withhold information. So it was told in a linear timeline, but then things would have happened a little bit in the past and then you won't find out until a little bit later. And just the way that information was delivered, it was so unexpected at so many points in the story. I really loved how the characters were written. A lot of these characters aren't likable, but particularly how Michael, who is the youngest son of the Godfather, how his character development was just chef's kiss. Like so good. He starts off sort of in some ways being an outcast from the family. He's just not interested in the family business, and then he ends up being forced to have to do stuff for the family and having a significant role as the story goes on. And I just thought it was really interesting to see him go from this character being sort of outside of the family, not really interested, and then to being a very central figure. The other thing I really loved about it was, if you know me, you know I love my politics, and this was so political, but so different to politics that I usually read. The politics I usually read is centered in a fantasy setting at some sort of court usually, whereas this is to do with the criminal underworld of New York in the 1940s. Politics in this works by this like 5 main mafia families. I can't remember if they're just in New York or if they're based all over the US, and it's the war between all the families. There's betrayals and it's a crazy good time. I just loved it. 5 stars. I have made a start on the last book, which is Lunar New Moon, and this is by McDonald. I am currently 122 pages in, so I'm not loving this. I'm really not loving this. It was interesting picking this book up right after The Godfather, because like I was saying before, how I was really contemplating lowering my star rating a little bit because of the way the women were portrayed in the story. This book kind of made me decide that what this book was not okay, but that I didn't need to lower a star rating and that I didn't need to be hypercritical of it. I'm still acknowledging what was wrong, like not wrong, but you know, I'm still being critical of. I think this book is really sexist. This author's just obsessed with sex. Like seriously, the amount of times he has to like drop in sex, like he even uses the word sexy to describe things. Like I'll find a sentence, I marked it. Okay, listen to this. Confidence is the most alluring necklace. She suits the sexy jewels of power. And then there's this one. Even on the moon, the only way a girl can get noticed is by taking her clothes off. There's comments like those every few pages. I'm not really loving the writing either, to be honest. A lot of it is overfilled with information. This book, we start off and we're introduced to all these families. So they're called the 5 dragons, and they're all these different families that live on the moon, and they use the resources on the moon to profit and live their wealthy lives, basically. We are introduced to like all the families, all their like relationships, like all their interrelations. Where I'm at, there's no real development of plot. We've just been introduced to everyone, which was a lot to take in, and we've been introduced to kind of the world. I don't know if I'm getting lost in the world building, but nothing's really impressed me yet. And then it says on the back that there's going to be a war, which I believe is going to be between all the families that are ruling the moon. But right now where I'm reading at, there's no real indication of what's happening with the plot. It's just I finished this somehow. This was horrendous. This was so bad. This is the worst book I've read this year. I don't DNF books, but I was so tempted to DNF this. Okay, let me back up, let me calm down and try and get my thoughts together so I can give you guys a little bit of an insight into the pain I went through while reading this. I think where I left off with you guys, I was telling you guys that I believe this was going to be about a war between all these different kind of mafia families on the moon. That doesn't actually happen until like the last 70 pages. That plot line starts to unfold. This book had more sex in it than it did plot. Which, look, if you read a book like an erotica book, then yeah, that's what you would expect. But this is supposed to be, and it looks like a hard sci-fi book, but there is more sex than there is sci-fi. There is more sex than there is plot. There is more sex than like anything else in this book. This sex wasn't like my issue, okay? If the author wants to have a lot of sex in his book, fine, do that. I'm probably not going to love the book because I don't think it's going to add a lot of value to the story, and that's, at the end of the day, is what I'm reading for. But this was incredibly problematic. Like, look at my notes. I've made so many notes on things I just thought were atrocious. This author, Ian McDonald, really liked to use sexy to describe things. He'd use it to describe jewelry. He used sexy to describe a gun, like just so many things. Like, not only did he have to include so much sex, but like sexy was his #1 word to describe something. This is a sci-fi novel. Like, what the I really despised this quote. I have a theory that this is why the moon is so open sexually. It's not about labels like straight or gay or bi or poly or a. It's about you and what you want to do. Sex is a contract between the fucker and the fucky. Who the hell includes fucky in their novel? And not to mention how problematic that sentence is. Most of this book was about sex, but other than that, we're following this family called the Quarter family, and they're the biggest family that's living on the moon, that's using the moon's resources, sort of ruling as well. We follow Adriana Quarter, who is the first. We're switching between her retelling her story of her past and how she grew up on Earth and how she came to the moon. There's this whole thing where if you come to the moon, your body will change and you're not able to return to Earth. So once you're on the moon, or if you're born on the moon, you're there for life. And then in the other narrative, she is an old lady, and we're getting to know this dynasty and family that she's built and all their sexual encounters. I really want to do a thread on Twitter where I just like screenshot all these awful quotes because I just need you to know how I suffered. This is the kind of book I would love to see read with Cindy read and do a rant review on. She would have so many fantastic references to bounce off. I'm already picturing it. Like, I wish that video existed because this was so painful and it would just made it so worth it to be able to watch her video after suffering through this. I'm so disappointed in this. And reading the blurb, literally all the blurb says is it talks about how the moon's like this really dangerous place to live environmentally, and then it talks about the 5 families, also known as the 5 dragons in this world, and how they are fighting over rulership of the moon. And I'm just like, this is the most mismarketed book I have ever read. I'm laughing, but I'm crying inside. Like, anyway, I'm still really glad I did this video because I loved The Godfather. Highly recommend that. Gave it 5 stars. And I also really adored Jade City. I originally gave it like 4.5. I don't know why I'm bumping it up to a 5 stars now. That's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Please never read this. I really hope you don't, because if you encounter this book, I'm so sorry. Like, if you made it to the end of this video, please leave me a gun or a bomb emoji down in the comments to let me know that you liked it. And I really hope that you're enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and I'll see you next time. Bye!